UFC Fight Night, Rose Namajunas versus Amanda Ribas. We are 5 days away. I cannot wait for this insanely stacked card. Rose Namajunas is the thug, and she's thugging it out. And we got... Oh, man. This is going to be a rough one, guys. This is going to be a rough one. And, we're just going to have to get through this. We're going to have to get through it. Listen, hold on. Let's be respectful. Let's be respectful. Because we do have to understand that there are some tough cookies going at it in the main event, okay? So, I'm pretty excited for this fight night. I'm really excited. There's a lot of good talent. There's a lot of up-and-comers, all right? Now, if the UFC just marketed these fight nights as the next gen, bunch of nobodies, bunch of Dana White Contender Series alum, the next guys in the UFC, next ranked fighters, I would be a little bit more excited. It would be more palatable. All right, but because all the fight nights are kind of the same, and then sometimes they're stacked and sometimes they're okay, this one just stands out as total dog shit. This one sucks. And I usually, on my fight night videos, talk about how, this is actually a pretty underrated fight night. I've said that about the last few, maybe not the Tuivasa card, but a few before that. Shamil the Blob Gaziev versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik was a really excellent card, in my opinion. This one, not so much. But either way, let's get into these predictions. I didn't even mention this is my prediction breakdown, by the way. Check the timestamps in the description if you're interested. And let's just get into it. The first fight on this card is going to be, you know what? I'm actually excited for this one. Mohammad Usman versus Mick Parkin. Mohammad Usman is back. The light heavyweight, certified light heavyweight, sauced up to the gills. I will say this. Mohammad Usman may have some of the ugliest technique I've ever seen in my entire life. He is atrocious at striking. He looks like he just started training a couple of months ago, to be honest. Mick Parkin, he's kind of on the opposite end of the scale. He is pretty technical. The only issue for Mick Parkin, and this is an undefeated heavyweight that trains with Tom Aspinall. If you've looked at some of Tom Aspinall's vlogs, you'll see Mick Parkin in the background. He's a big dude, natural heavyweight, but, let's be honest, should actually be fighting at light heavyweight anyway. The only issue with Mick Parkin is he has no speed at all. Zero speed. He just doesn't have any pop. He's a decision merchant, and I'm starting to think that this guy was created in the Apex. So I am going to be picking Mohammad Usman. Even though his technique sucks, like when I say he has some of the ugliest striking I've ever seen in my entire life, go and rewatch his fight with Jake Collier. And we talk about guys like Jake Collier as being NPC heavyweights. Collier was actually looking good and kind of fast. It honestly seemed like he was fighting for his freedom. Now, we know that Mohammad Usman is a real guy. He is brothers with Kamaru Usman, so he's not an NPC heavyweight. The fact that he sucks so much kind of makes it obvious, too. It's like the NPCs are usually kind of technical, but either way, Jake Collier actually looked kind of fast. He was putting the jab on Usman. He was lighting him up early. But Usman's just a dog. It runs in the family, dude. He's a dog. He's got the grit. He bit down on the mouthpiece. And he just said, fuck it. Let me just get after this guy. He has great chin. He was taking big shots. He got wobbled once pretty badly. Kind of woke him up. And despite him having sloppy striking, he just got in Collier's face. Started cutting him up, bruising him up as the fight progressed. Landing big, powerful shots. Couldn't really get the wrestling going, although against Junior Tafa, he was able to take him down a few times, and I think he got like 10 minutes of control time in that fight. And then we know he knocked out Zach Pauga to win the Ultimate Fighter. I'm going to pick Usman just because, even though I think he's going to lose this fight early on because Mick Parkin's going to be in there, Mr. Technical. He's going to be throwing inside leg kicks. He's going to be landing little pitter-pat jabs. That's basically it. We're just going to see pitter-pats. We're going to see him looking slow as a tortoise, and I don't think he has the ability to make Mohammad Usman pay with any serious power or speed. And as much as this is going to sound harsh, because Mick Parkin is a young heavyweight, he's training with Tom, his inspiration, Tom Aspinall's in the gym, I don't think he's good at all right? And I think he may have the skills. He's just not a great athlete, to be honest. Like, he just doesn't have it. I'm sorry. I got to go with Usman, just based on being a better athlete and imposing his will. Mick Parkin, sure, he might be able to win the outside foot battle, right? He might be able to stuff a couple of takedowns because his takedown defense actually looked pretty good, for example, against Jamal Pogues. And we know that Jamal Pogues actually has fast hands. He has good wrestling, and I was kind of impressed by Mick Parkin. He trains with a bunch of heavyweights. Aspinall's got the heavyweight-only team going on, and I think that really helps him out with his takedown defense, constantly stuffing takedowns or at least trying to stuff him against guys like Aspinall. So you're definitely going to get better in that department, but there's just some things that aren't really going to improve in my opinion. And if this guy is a bit of a decision merchant at this point, facing guys like Cal Machado, all right, Jamal Pogues. Jamal Pogues is okay. He's got nice, fast hands. He's got decent wrestling, but I just see no finishing ability. And for Usman, he doesn't even need to finish the fight. He doesn't even have to. I just think he needs to bite down on the mouthpiece, move forward, and get a little bit wild on Mick Parkin. And I think he can win this fight. I'm going to go with Mohammad Usman by decision, or maybe even a TKO. But I don't see him having that much success with the wrestling. I just see him out-damaging Mick Parkin with the hands in the second and the third round. Let's get on to the next one. But I will say this. I won't be shocked if Mohammad Usman loses, because I cannot be shocked if someone as bad as him on the feet gets beat by decision. Let's just say that. But I will be picking Usman. Let's get on to the next one. On to the next one. Igor Severino versus Andre Lima. You know, this is a fascinating one. This is a really good matchup. And I've been waiting for this for years. I'm joking, because both guys have yet to fight in the UFC. Two guys making their UFC debut. Andre Lima, 25 years old, with a lot of Muay Thai and kickboxing fights. So he has a lot of experience when it comes to like pure striking. He's undefeated. So is Igor Severino, who is 20 years old. Less striking experience, but a little bit more MMA experience. But I'm going to be picking Andre Lima. And I don't have the best reasons, okay? Because it's kind of hard to find Andre Lima fight footage. And it's a lot easier to find Igor Severino fight footage. But from what I've seen, I think that Andre Lima has some really good, overwhelming striking. And I am going to pick him to beat Igor Severino. And also, 25 years old, probably a little bit stronger than Igor, who's 20. I'm not saying, you know, age is going to be a huge factor here, but it's going to be a factor here. Okay, one guy, 25 is a big difference than 20. You're able to kind of grow into your man strength a little bit more by that age. So I'm going to go with Andre Lima. Again, it's real difficult to pick a fight like this. Like, come on. You know, both of these guys are fighting in the UFC for the first fucking time. We'll see how they look when they get to the big stage. I'm going with Andre Lima. On to the next one. Steven Nguyen versus Jarno Errens. This is where it gets serious, because we're going to talk about a guy that still has yet to make his UFC debut in Steven Nguyen, who I will be picking to KO Jarno Errens. Okay, Jarno Errens, this is what you got to know about him, okay? He lost to William Gomez by decision. And if you know anything about William Gomez and you know anything about my channel, you know that's going to be a bad look. In order for you to lose to William Gomez, you have to be an NPC. Because William Gomez is an NPC. He is 50 power across the board. Decent striking, does a whole bunch of nothing. Jarno or whatever the fuck his name, Jarno ain't that good. Okay? So underwhelming. He lost to Sung Woo Choi. Not the worst look in the world. You know, and he's basically 0-2 in the UFC. Steven Nguyen is a knockout artist with big KO power in his hands, moves forward. And you know what I always say, the biggest difference maker before the rankings is your ability to move forward and actually put it on someone and take the fight to them. And of course, you need decent technique. But Jarno, I'm sorry, that there's just nothing dangerous that this guy has going on. There's no method to his madness. I'm sure he's got some grappling. He was trying some grappling against William Gomez, but no, I'm picking Steven Nguyen. He's been KO'd before in the Dana White Contender Series. That was a few years ago. He got flying knee KO'd in the first round, but since then, he's been on a tear, 3-fight win streak, coming off of a first round KO on the Contender Series. Second round KO. And then he's also got a bunch of other KOs throughout his career, like one-punch knockouts. And he's got a bunch of those. So I just think that this is the guy. More aggressive, heavier-handed. There's just a different kind of approach to a fight. And I can't ever pick a guy like Jarno Errens, who's lost both of his UFC fights by decision. No urgency, no hustle from this guy. No dangerous element. On to the next one. Miles Johns versus Cody Gibson. Cody Gibson has a horrible UFC record, of course. We know that he's coming off of TUF. and he even lost to Brad Katona, and that's a bad look. I was honestly considering picking, what's his name? Who's the guy that beat Brad Katona? Garrett Armfield? I was considering picking Garrett Armfield. I fell into the trap of Brad Katona. You know how they always hype up these tough guys, right? Man, he's been on tear. He's a wrestler, and they show all these highlights of Brad Katona doing his wrestling. And he ends up just having absolutely no pop in his hands, all right? He's not got any ability to keep a takedown. And Cody Gibson, despite having a 5-inch reach advantage and a massive height advantage and a frame advantage and a power advantage, still lost to Brad Katona. That's not a good look. He's older. He was a tough guy. We know that the last season of Tough just produced the worst guys ever. I mean, these were literally UFC rejects. I'm going with Miles Johns. Miles Johns ain't anything special, but he has at least been able to keep his career in the UFC. Okay? He's a tough out, and he's got big power. Now, his stature for this weight class is pretty atrocious. He's listed at 5'7". He honestly looks like he's 5'4". But, you know, listen, he's got big, heavy hands, heavy-handed. He's explosive. He's strong. He's rooted into the ground. And I think that for a guy like Cody Gibson, if you got little Brad Katona, Nerd Katona in front of you and you can't put him away, it's going to be a little bit difficult to put away stone hands. This is like a poor man's John Lineker sitting in front of you. I'm definitely going to go with Miles Johns, and I think he'll be able to mix in some takedowns. Now, I do expect him to be getting lit up early. Cody Gibson was looking kind of nice in that fight with Katona. He was landing some nice clean uppercuts, some sneaky uppercuts on him. He was sticking behind the jab. I just trust Miles Johns to get this one done. So, yeah, I'm going to go with Miles Johns to defeat Cody Gibson. Let's get on to the next one. And also, Cody Gibson's a little bit old. How old is Cody Gibson? Let's just double check this. 36. Miles Johns, we're talking 29. Listen, I know that we usually don't factor in age that much if it's not like a top 10 ranked fight or a championship fight, but it still always is, in a way, a bit of a factor. And you're just losing a war to Brad Katona. It's not the best look. You got Brad Katona looking like Robbie Lawler in front of you. That's not the best look. On to the next one, Ricardo Ramos versus Julian Erosa. I'm going to go with Ricardo Ramos by first round KO, something wild, okay? Now, I will say this, Ricardo Ramos is very unreliable. Sometimes he's super low output, and there doesn't really seem to be a method to his madness. He's not really got a specific style that he sticks to, other than just throwing a whole bunch of flashy BS without a plan sometimes. And it works against very low-level competition, which is why I am picking him to win this fight, because sometimes it works. We'll see a lot of spinning kicks from him. We'll see spinning elbows. He got that nasty spinning elbow. First round KO over Danny Chavez. Landed the same thing on Zubaida Tukhugov in their fight on UFC 267. Zubaida was whooping his ass early. At the end of the first round, Ricardo Ramos just lands this brutal spinning elbow on him, rocks him badly, and it has Zubaida shooting takedowns to save his life for the rest of the fight. Now, we did lose that fight. Losing to Zubaida is not the best look. All right, I've seen not very impressive guys beat Zubaida Tukhugov. Losing to Charles Jourdain, not a bad look, okay, because Charles Jourdain is okay, maybe not good enough to be ranked anymore. I don't really think as highly of him as I used to, especially after the Sean Woodson fight, but Sean Woodson's kind of a tough fighter. But I do think that Julian Erosa doesn't have the best chin. He doesn't have a whole lot of power in his hands. He's not that dynamic. And, you know, to be honest, he's kind of like a slow person. I mean, the best way I can describe him, he looks like he's just fighting in slow motion. Like wake up. You look like you're sparring out there, honestly. The way that this guy throws his punches, they're so sluggish. We see this guy kind of leaning over, oafing over, and, you know, there's no urgency. Like, you can't just get knocked the fuck out. Are you kidding me? Literally watch this guy strike. It's just like he's in slow motion, man. So I'm picking Ricardo Ramos to spinning elbow this guy into the shadow realm. All right? I'm picking Ricardo Ramos. Dude, Julian Erosa is so fucking slow. Listen, he's had a couple good wins. He's had a couple good wins against Hakeem Dawodu, but Hakeem Dawodu is a whole bunch of talk. Hakeem Dawodu just freaking yaps in the cage from the sidelines, right? But when it actually gets down to it, like, you know, he's not going to really go to war. But again, You look at the guys that are beating him. Alex Caceres knocked his ass out with a nasty head kick. Fernando Padilla caught him lacking when his hands were down. Julian Erosa, hands down slow, chucking these like lazy hooks. Honestly, looked like he was fighting in a dream. And he gets just cracked, obliterated with like an 8-piece combo. And I just think Ricardo Ramos, he has some good speed, some good power. He's literally been getting bigger throughout his career too. I can notice in his physique, he looks to be like gaining more size from fight to fight. He's 28. Erosa's 34. He's slow. Ricardo Ramos has that like out of nowhere ability with flashy techniques. He is dangerous. I am picking Ricardo Ramos. A little bit faster, more explosive, very unorthodox. And I think that he'll be losing a little bit early, but he'll be losing until he's not. So I'm going to pick Ricardo Ramos by first round KO. On to the next one. Holobaugh, a tough prospect I actually like, versus Trey Ogden, a UFC fighter I don't want to see any more of. Okay, now listen, let's actually be real for a second. Trey Ogden has one decent win that stands out on paper, where if you just look at his record, you'll say, okay, I'm going to pick this guy because he beat Daniel Zellhuber, who just had an amazing performance at UFC Fight Night Mexico City, where he was totally destroying the Argentinian Drew Dober, Francisco Prado, and people were talking about him like, dude, this guy's a prospect here, pretty good. I watched that fight back. Nothing was really happening. It was just a bunch of pitter-pat nonsense. It really seemed like an off night for Daniel Zellhuber. This guy's gotten beat by Ignacio Bahamondes, who has one of the worst fight IQs in the business. And he's also lost a decision to Jordan Levitt. He's basically lost every single one of his fights for the most part. And Nicholas Mota was whooping him up in that fight too. Nicholas Mota was whooping him up. And listen, guys, I will say this. Even though Holobaugh is an old head, he's got that old man strength. Now, sometimes if you're an old head, I might not want to pick you to win a fight. He does look a lot older than he actually is, but he is 37. He looks like he's about 47, 50. But he's got that farmer strength, and I really like that from him in this one, because when he was fighting Austin Hubbard for the tough finale, in which he was able to finish Austin Hubbard with a choke after whooping him up and hurting him badly in the stand-up, I realized, number one, he's got a good chin, right? Kind of has a clunky style on the feet. He's not all that clean and crisp, but he has some thudding power. He has a good chin, and he moves forward like a warrior. He has good wrestling. He was chaining together his submissions, ended up getting the triangle choke. And I just see that this guy is fighting with like a Jim Miller style of grit that I have to appreciate. And I do think he's going to beat Trey Ogden, who, again, we're going to have to call this guy Mr. Pitterpat. He doesn't really do a whole lot. Like, he's not got anything excellent going on in his game. I mean, he's beating Daniel Zellhuber with a little pitsy-pat outside leg kick. And that's just not that impressive, man. Whereas I'm watching Holobaugh and Austin Hubbard, and Holobaugh's getting in his face, and he's freaking taking shots, and he's firing ones back, and his shots are landing hard, and he's rocking Austin Hubbard, and they're going to war, and it's dogfight. A 37-year-old man is winning a dogfight. He's still here. He's still alive. I'll tell you this. 37-year-old guy winning a dogfight, winning a firefight, that means that they're fighting for the right reasons, okay? Whereas Trey Ogden, let me just check his age. He's 34. Not that this makes a difference. I mean, it kind of does, though, because 34 is around that age where it's like, things might not be working out somewhat. You're 37, you're in a dogfight in the UFC, and you fought on tough? Again, I like that. I like that a lot. Now, you could say, well, what about Bracatona? He was in a dogfight. Yeah, but Bracatona's like 32. All right, so let's get on to the next one. I'm going with Holobaugh, and I'm going to pick him to win this fight via first or second. No, not first round. No. I think it's going to be a little bit of a scrap. I think Holobaugh is going to get to him in the second or third round, and I think he's going to get the finish by TKO, maybe even a submission. Let's get on to the next one. Fernando Padilla versus Luis Pajuelo. I really liked Fernando Padilla, who was the guy that did KO Julian Erosa. All right, Fernando Padilla smoked him in the first. And he looked cocky in the beginning of that fight. He had his hands down. He was looking across the cage at Julian Erosa like, man, this is about to be easy work. He goes out there and he smokes him. And he's up against Guram Kurtaledze from Canada, Kyle Nelson. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, this is going to be easy. This is the Walmart, Guram Kurtaledze. Fernando Padilla is going to go out there and smoke this man. Kyle Nelson gives him a tough battle, wins a decision. Terrible look for Fernando Padilla. And I just have to say this, Fernando Padilla, he's like a skinny version of Yair Rodriguez, which says a lot. I mean, Yair's skinny. I mean, Fernando Padilla is a twig version of that. So you're not going to see any physicality out of this guy. You're not going to see any impressive grappling. You're not going to see any big power. Now, he does have those long, wiry strikes where if he catches you at the end of those 1-2s or the straight punches, you're going to be in some trouble, okay? You don't want to get caught at the end of those. But Luis Pajuelo, he fights very aggressively, always on the front foot. All right, he's yet to fight in the UFC, but he had a really good performance on the Dana White Contender Series, marching forward like a warrior, throwing big bombs, ended up getting a first-round KO. I am going to pick Luis Pajuelo to KO Fernando Padilla in this fight, and I'm probably going to pick him by first or second round. Now, I could see Fernando Padilla catching Luis Pajuelo. I could see that. But I look at Luis Puello's record. He has tons of KOs. And for that reason, I think it's more likely that he's the guy that's going to get the finish. And I think he's going to be the one that's going to get in on the inside of the longer reach of Padilla. And I just think his shots are going to have a heavy impact. And Kyle Nelson was kind of rocking Padilla, which is not the best look. Luis Pajuelo may not be as crisp as Kyle Nelson, but he definitely is more dangerous. I'm going to pick him to win this one. And if these guys get into a clinch, if they get into the grappling, I'm just looking at the build of Padilla. He's built like a twig, man. So I think that Luis Pajuelo, at this level, very early on in the UFC, the build kind of matters. Physicality means a lot. Let's get on to a really meaningful matchup now. Payton Talbott versus Cameron Saaiman. I don't want to pick Cameron Saaiman just because it's Saaiman and we all like him and we're all familiar with him. Dricus du Plessis' training partner. I know that's like an unfortunate way to describe him, but if he wasn't a training partner of Dricus, we may not know of him as well as we do. But I really like Cameron Saaiman, and I'm picking him for the right reasons. I'm not just going to pick him in this fight over Payton Talbott because we're familiar with him and we like him, okay? Payton Talbott's pretty good, but he was getting muscled around in his UFC debut. Muscled around in his UFC debut against a nobody, Nick Aguirre, who is not that good, okay? And that just wasn't a good look. He got totally destroyed in the first round. Now, you could look at guys like Christian Rodriguez, who we saw fight last weekend. By the way, he lost. Let's not talk about him as if he won. But there are guys like Christian Rodriguez that'll get dominated by Raul Rosas in the first round, that'll get dominated in the first round by Dolgarian, and they'll come back to dominate in the end of it. Payton Talbott is a dog. He's tough. And I could see him weathering an early storm against guys that are going to grapple against him. He'll survive. And because he has this style of striking, his style of striking is march forward, bite down on the mouthpiece, and sit on big shots. He's trying to knock you out. He has some big power in his hands. He has some really fast kicks. His kicks are awesome. His hand speed's pretty good. He's creative too. He's really creative. A bit of a showboater. If you watch his fights outside of the UFC, kind of reminds me of O'Malley a little bit with the way that he can create really nice openings. All right, he kind of flows really well with his striking, and then he'll drop guys and he'll kind of stand over them and like look at them like this, like he's pondering some really important question. He's got some really cool highlights, definitely. But the reason I am going to pick Cameron Saaiman to win this fight is because Cameron Saiman's a dog. Okay, let me just get that out of the way. He's a dog. He has a good chin. He was taking big shots from Christian Rodriguez. And we're now starting to understand that Christian Rodriguez is actually kind of good. All right? Win or loss against Dolgarian, he's kind of good. He's kind of tough. And he's kind of like creative in the way that he fights. He's sneaky. He's skilled. And he's probably going to be able to beat most of the lower level guys. If we see Raul Rosas Jr. dominating low level guys, if we see Dolgarian smoking low-level guys. We cannot say Dolgarian smoked Christian Rodriguez just because he won the first 2 rounds. Christian Rodriguez is like giving these guys hell in these fights, in the later half of the fights at least. And Cameron Saaiman, despite the fact that he lost that, he was still eating big shots on the feet despite getting outstruck slightly. He was not deterred in any way, shape, or form. He was still throwing his own shots. He was still trying his hardest to get out of bad positions on the ground, and he was getting out of bad positions on the ground. He did not gas out against a guy that is known for outlasting his opponents. And Christian Rodriguez missed weight by like 3.5 pounds. And in a very physical fight like the fight that he had with Cameron Saaiman, a 3.5 pound weight advantage makes a huge difference, especially with all the grappling that they were doing. Payton Talbott is a little bit bigger than Cameron Saaiman. Saaiman still needs to grow into this weight class a little bit more, but he's more well-rounded. I know Payton Talbott got the rear naked choke in his last fight, but it was in the 3rd round. Okay, it was in the 3rd round. It took a while. There was a lot of adversity, and I like that. I like the fact that he was willing to fight through adversity, and he kind of broke this guy in the 3rd, but that's kind of what it was. Payton Talbott's opponent in the last fight just started breaking in front of him, and it was quite obvious. I could see it while watching the fight back. The commentators were talking about it. Cameron Saaiman is not wilting in front of this guy. He's so fucking tough, especially training out of that CIT gym in South Africa with the crazy training methods people are talking about, something about tasers. I mean, the coach is crazy. It's a sink or swim environment. And I think Cameron Saaiman's style just shows that too. He's got a good chin. He's got great cardio. He's pushing a pace. He's like a mini Dricus du Plessis with a little bit less power. So I will pick him to win this fight just because I don't see him giving up. And I just think he's going to have a similar performance to Payton Talbott's debut opponent. It's just he's going to be able to keep it up for much longer, and he'll be a tougher guy to deal with on the feet. He'll be faster on the feet. So I'm going to pick Cameron Saaiman via out-grappling Payton Talbott and just out-dogging him in close-range striking exchanges, okay? Now, if Payton Talbott wins, I won't be shocked. I just kind of need to see him get an impressive win or at least something dominant before I can pick him against a Cameron Saaiman. The last win that he had, it was good in the sense that he survived the early onslaught and was able to fight past adversity, and he was able to break this guy and keep composed. It was a high fight IQ win, but Cameron Saaiman losing to Christian Rodriguez, in hindsight, is not the worst loss. He was also kind of in there. He was just a step behind the whole time, and the guy had a 3.5 pound weight advantage. Cameron Saaiman super well-rounded. He's fast on the feet. He's got heavy hands. He's got a bunch of KOs as well. He's got great wrestling. He's got good ground and pound. He's got good submissions. I'm picking him. He's a little bit more well-rounded. So a little bit more experience in the UFC too. So let's get on to the next one. Oh, I didn't say a method. I think that Cameron Saaiman wins a decision here. Okay? And he's coming back for vengeance. He's finally tasted defeat. Well, finally. I mean, he's tasted defeat. That must suck. But I think he's going to come back with a vengeance in this fight. Edmen Shabazyan versus AJ Dobson. I'm going to be picking Edmen Shabazyan. We all know Edmen Shabazyan has gas tank issues. He's a great round one fighter, and after that, it all comes crashing down. But it usually just comes crashing down against guys that can actually push a pace on him or force him to fight in their style of fight, right? We saw Edmen Shabazyan get a recent win over Dalche Lungiambula, but then he got smoked by Anthony Hernandez after beating up Hernandez a little bit in the first round, got totally smoked. We've seen this guy get smoked by Brunson. We've seen him get beat up by crafty man Jack Hermanson as well. AJ Dobson's just not on these guys' level that end up beating Edmen Shabazyan, okay? Nasruddin Imavov beats up Edmen Shabazyan after a tough first round. Actually, I think he won the first round against Edmen, but he beat him up on the ground. AJ Dobson is a striker who's really just got a nice jab and a couple of nice leg kicks, a nice teep to the body. That's kind of it. He's very bread and butter, by the book, basic. He's not that powerful, and he's not that well-rounded. And again, Edmen Shabazyan, 26 years old, which is just crazy because this guy's been around for such a long time. You would expect Edmen Shabazyan, you would expect him to be like 40 years old at this point. 40 years old. Edmen Shabazyan is crazy. But, Imavov, Hermanson, Brunson, Hernandez, those are the only guys. Anthony Hernandez, who is a fucking monster, all right? Nasruddin Imavov. I don't care if his last win was over a fucking middleweight blob like Roman Dolidze. like, he's good. He's a good fighter. He actually gave Sean Strickland some tough moments, and Imavov is pretty damn technical. Jack Hermansson, that win is aging, or that loss for Edmen is aging well. Hermansson's Mr. Crafty. And then we have Derek Brunson. Also lost the first round, but ended up getting a TKO, and that was the first guy to fraud check Edmund. And people will say things like Derek Bumpson. And that's always true when he's fighting in like championship level fights or against guys that have really good takedown defense. Because, I mean, if you have good takedown defense, you'll easily beat Derek Brunson in the middleweight division. The issue is, if Derek Brunson actually gets a takedown on you, he's one of the most dangerous grapplers. And I feel like he never really got the respect he deserved. I always heard people shitting on Derek Brunson, and they would never mention the one thing that he does well. And it would always just be, man, how are people losing to this guy? And I could understand that because he is very sloppy on the feet. He doesn't have a good chin. He makes a lot of mistakes. And someone that's that sloppy should not be at the top of the middleweight division. But you cannot deny that Derek Brunson was a phenomenal wrestler and had some of the best ground and pound in MMA. He had phenomenal ground and pound. He was really dangerous there. AJ Dobson just doesn't have any of that. He's not Anthony Hernandez pushing a crazy pace with Merab Dvalishvili like cardio, but like serious finishing ability too. This ain't Nasruddin Imavov with his Cyril Gahn-like striking. And this is not Jack Hermansson or Derek Brunson. This is AJ Dobson, who's a very simple striker, has a decent jab, not a great finisher. I'm definitely going to go with Edmen Shabazyan, and I think he'll probably get the finish in this one. And also, 26 years old. He's been out of the cage for quite some time, and it's been a long time since he's last fought. Literally about a year. I think he's probably going to win this one. And 26, this guy's making big improvements at this point. He's learned a lot of lessons. Is the cardio ever going to be great? Probably not. It may be a genetic thing. I just don't think it's going to matter because I don't think Dobson's going to push that pace on him. So I'll pick Edmen Shabazyan to get this one done by like a first or second round TKO because he is very dangerous early on. Let's get on to the next one. Karl Williams, Justin Tafa. I'm going to go with Karl Williams to get this one done by decision, which is kind of crazy because most people are obviously going to pick Justin Tafa. Now, the reason I'm picking Karl Williams, despite the fact that he's going to have like a 30-pound weight disadvantage, and we usually think of that in the heavyweight division as something that's bad. We'll think of matchups like Stipe Miocic versus Francis Ngannou, where Stipe came in at 232 or something, and Ngannou came at 265, and then on Fight Night, he was probably 285. Well, listen, Justin Tafa is not Francis Ngannou. All right, Justin Tafa is a heavyweight striker. He's like a new age Mark Hunt. He's dangerous for sure, and he is getting better. He looked pretty good against Austin Lane, but I just don't think he's going to have great technique when it comes to his takedown defense. I don't at all. Karl Williams, I know I had a similar take with Shamil Dublab-Gaziev and Jairzinho. I was like, Jairzinho doesn't have good takedown defense. But he actually has at least showed at times in his career takedown defense against Curtis Blades, for example. Who the fuck has Justin Tafa been stuffing takedowns from? And also, let me just say this. Justin Tafa lost to Jared Vandera, Carlos Felipe. All right, we know he got slept out cold by Yorgan De Castro. Yes, he beat Parker Porter, and yes, he beat Austin Lane. And yes, he beat Harry Hunsucker, who was shooting a couple takedowns on him. So to be fair, he was able to at least shuck off Harry Hunsucker. But Karl Williams is fast. He has the lighter man speed. He's like 230 pounds. He's a little bit small for heavyweight. But I think in this matchup, especially with the style that he has, where he kind of just sticks to you, even if he gets the takedown stuffed, he'll just stick to you in the clinch. That could be dangerous in close range with Tafa, but Karl Williams is strong. That's not. I'm going to emphasize that. He's not just, a guy that's going to be spamming takedowns and he's got like a nice speed to his entry, but he's kind of strong too. And just something tells me Tafa is probably not going to have great takedown defense, man. Justin Tafa, he just wants to get in there and fucking slug. He just wants to get in there and trade big bombs. And Karl Williams is going to show him what the grind's all about. And that's the thing. Because this is not a guy where he's going to have a fun matchup with. Maybe he could stuff the takedowns, but I just think Karl Williams is a little bit too technical for him. I think he's going to be able to get him to the mat, and I think he's going to be able to stink it up. Or maybe he'll get the takedown, and he'll find that Justin Tafa is so easy to cut through that he'll just get a TKO or a submission, right? But this guy is undefeated in the UFC so far. He was able to get past the Goliath that is Chase Sherman. He's faster. He's got good technical wrestling. He's got good chain wrestling. He's got good speed. He's got good strength. I'm picking Karl Williams to get this one done by decision. I won't be shocked if Justin Tafa gets a first-round KO, but the reason why I'm picking Karl Williams ultimately is because if Tafa doesn't get the first-round KO and has a frustrating first round, we're going to see him look super tired, okay? Just the way that he moves, his body type, this dude ain't going to have great cardio. On to the next one, Rose Namajunas versus Amanda Ribas. How could you pick against Rose? She's just so scary. She's a thug, man. She's a thug, man. But then again, Amanda Ribas, well, she's tough as well. She's really tough. And I may need to pick Rose Namajunas to get this one done. Why? Rose Namajunas is better boxing. Rose Namajunas is better grappling. And she did break her hand in the first round against Mick Parkin, which is not an excuse. I don't mean to be like Darren Till right now. No excuses. But she still looked decent after breaking her hand. She was still landing sneaky uppercuts, sneaky counter shots. And Mick Parkin is a better striker, better technical striker than Amanda Ribas. Listen, Amanda Ribas is fun to watch because she actually goes out there looking to fight. And she actually embraces going to war. But she's a little bit chinny. She's been knocked out a few times in her career. And she does have a lot of scar tissue. I mean, she wears damage, and it's very easy to see it in her fight. She almost looks like Jose Aldo after a war, like the female version of Jose Aldo. Listen, I am going to pick Rose Namajunas. I just think that the boxing is going to be on another level. Remember, Rose is moving up a weight class. This is her second fight in the flyweight division. And I think she's going to still have that extra speed advantage, right? She's going to have better timing. And we've seen how good her grappling is, even against people like Zhang Weili. And if you're able to stay in there with Zhang Weili in the grappling, and you're able to just even win a decision, even though some people kind of thought that Zhang Weili won that second fight. And of course, we know that she knocked out Zhang Weili with the head kick in their first fight. 2 wins over Zhang Weili is fucking insane for WMMA. All right? It is pretty crazy. Losing to Mick Parkin, Carla Esparza, we can't even count that. The only losses that I can really think of is Jessica Andrade, and she was winning that fight and she got slammed. Okay, credit to Andrade, but she beat Andrade in the rematch. Karolina Kowalkiewicz, okay, that was forever ago. So it's literally just Jessica Andrade and maybe Zhang Weili and Karolina Kowalkiewicz. I just butchered that name, and of course Carla Esparza back in the day. But listen, guys, how are you going to go with Amanda Ribas in this fight? I guess there's always the mental side of it where you don't know what Rose is showing up, right? Is she mentally all there? She's a bit of a head case, right? So that's always something. But I think that she's going to do all right, because even though people were clowning her for making excuses after her last fight or going into it, they were saying she just doesn't seem mentally there. She doesn't really seem like she really wants it. She's just kind of showing up to have a trip in Paris. She still had an okay performance despite breaking her hand early on in that fight. And of course, credit to Mick Parkin for being the one to injure the hand. But she still looked all right. Again, boxing has always been a strong suit. Her kicks are good. And I just think that Amanda Ribas, she wears damage a lot. And I think that if this goes to decision, the judges are going to be looking at her face, bruised up, bubbled up, cut up. And then Rose Namajunas, who doesn't have the same issue in her fights. I'm going to pick Rose Namajunas by KO. I'm going to go with Rose Namajunas by KO. I think Amanda Ribas is going to get crazy. Maybe she'll change things up and shoot some takedowns, but I just don't think it's going to work out for her. Rose Namajunas has been grappling a lot. She's been talking about these competitions, jiu-jitsu competitions, and how it's like her new passion. So, I mean, it's like no matter where you go in this fight, if you're Amanda Ribas, you're probably not as good. So I'm going to go with Rose to win this fight by second round KO or decision. I'm excited for it. I think this will be a good main event. I think it'll be a good main event. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments. That's it for this video. Until next time.